Most drivers think they're better than average drivers in studies we've done. So.
In studies you've done, that's what,
Yeah.
So what, how does that work? How do I drive out of a 1 out of 10, and most people are coming in at 10?
Most people think they're better than average drivers, yeah. Last study
Based
that was
on what
done by
criteria?
CAA.
I mean, they don't drift lanes, they signal properly all the time, they never run lights, they don't speed.
Well, I've talked to a lot of the public, and if you were to ask a lot of the public how they rate themselves as a driver, most would tell you they rate themselves better than average. And obviously, that's not true if you look at the crashes we're dealing with.
So how do we get to the root of it then? I mean, how do we know what's what? Like how good are Calgary drivers, Alberta drivers?
Well, I mean, again, that's perception, right? It's no different than you observing a vehicle roll through a stop sign. You pull that vehicle over, and the person says, "What are you talking about? I stopped at that stop sign." Their mind isn't 100% on their task, and their perception is they came to a complete stop. You could even do in-car digital video and show them, no, your wheels are still turning. You went through there probably 5 kilometers an hour, and they still said, I didn't even realize it. So people don't actively aren't cognitive about exactly everything that they're doing behind the wheel.
How do you curb that as an instructor?
A tool that works very well to help people when driving is a tool called commentary driving, and that's talking about what's going on around you when you're driving. If you get people doing that, they'll be much more aware of their driving scene.
So it's an actual discussion as you're with the person in the car?
So it would be, for example, I'm driving down the road, looking in my rearview mirror, there's a vehicle coming up behind me, the speed ahead says 50 kilometers an hour, I'm looking at my gauge, it says 50 kilometers an hour, there's a vehicle coming up on my left, just talking about your environment.
And it's yielding some pretty positive results, it sounds like.
It works very well. That's how we teach people to drive or raise awareness of licensed drivers. That's how we do it.
So what's changed then, as far as the curriculum, I guess, over the past, say, 10 years?
There's a lot of things have changed, I suppose, whether it's vehicle technology or some driving
as far as like
laws.
I guess an instructor perspective, how are you teaching these guys any different than you were in the past? I guess the reason I ask, I mean, for example, in Calgary, the last summer we had, I think it was 9 motorcycle deaths, which was up, I think, from 3
the year before.
The year before, which is, I mean, that's a substantial increase, 300% increase. Are we leaning on students to ensure that, like, look, motorcycles are going to be on the road, we need to pay attention type thing? How does that translate to new drivers? Absolutely.
Any drivers we deal with, we deal with driver behavior, driver attitude, visual skills. I mean, that's 90% of what you do behind the wheel comes through your vision, through your brain. So we work a lot on visual skills, work a lot on driver behavior. But you can teach students, if we're dealing with teenagers, for example, you can teach them certain things, but they're also watching mom and dad drive, so they're getting their biggest influences through mom and dad. So it's up to not just the police or not just driver education, but all of us to put out the proper type of driving.
From
to
the
show
family on out,
proper examples. You learn from your mom and dad.
Like many other things in society, of course.
Yeah.
Folks, we're going to jump to a quick break and hear again from the Rant Pack. Stay with us.
I get the distracted driving thing, but in my opinion, things like talking on the phone, I think is no more distracting than having a passenger in your car who's talking to you, you're carrying on a conversation and driving with one hand. So things like texting that will physically take your eyes off the wheel, I can understand, but something like talking on your phone, I don't see the harm in it. And especially when you see police officers are talking on their phone, you see people who are in logoed company vehicles talking on their phone, I just think that's something that we kind of just need to accept. It's not that big of a deal.
The problem with the distracted driving law is that it's so subjective. You've got texting, yes, distracting. You also have attractive people on the street, distracting. You've got large trucks driving really fast, distracting. You've got public art, distracting. How can you decide what is distracting and what is not distracting? It's pointless to try to make this grade, and the only point to it is that it's a cash cow for police.
Okay, so we heard from Justine and we heard from Derek. Justine's point being, she can talk on a phone and operate a motor vehicle. It sounds with a lot of confidence. Derek had alluded to the fact that how do you pinpoint what's a distraction? And he used the word cash cow for police. I'll let you respond to that if you would, Inspector.
Absolutely. First of all, I think we touched on Justine's attitude a little bit earlier in the show, where she feels she's a good driver and she can talk on the phone. hands-free driving is in most vehicles nowadays, and if not, you can buy the addition to the vehicle to
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, sure.
I would argue that, and I've seen this, people that are talking on the phone that have it up to their ear,
Yeah.
if they're trying to do a shoulder check or a lane change, it can't not help but impact your driving. Hence why the law was passed. As far as the second gentleman stating this is a cash cow for police, our job is to educate and enforce. And while that means there is certainly a financial impact to you, this goes to the provincial government, all traffic fines, and it's divided up among many different programs, social agencies, and so on and so forth. Police being able to talk on their cell phones, no. We are not above the law. We certainly have policy in place that our officers are instructed. You are no different than the average citizen.
Oh, is that right?
Absolutely.
See, I was under the impression that police and other essential emergency services were allowed to talk on cell phones.
There
because
are exemptions.
for like privacy reasons, right? Where shortwave radio, whatnot, you can, I guess, rob the signal.
There are exemptions. All Calgary Police Service vehicles have hands-free phone in it, first of all. So if an officer does need to make a phone call, he or she should be on hands-free. However, there are certain situations or scenarios where there may be an arrest in the back seat and there's some confidential information coming across, and that officer may have to pick up the phone to keep that private. But for an officer to phone home to his wife and say what's for dinner, what can I pick up some milk on the way home? No, they can't do that.
Okay.
We're no different than an average citizen.
And if citizens see police officers on phones like that?
Well, you know what? There is a process. If they want to make a complaint, they can certainly make a complaint.
Yeah.
Mark down the unit number, the time of day, and we can backtrack, do an investigation, and see if it was legitimate in the execution of their duties, or if they were in breach of the policy, then they can get a ticket just like anybody else.
I might suggest to our viewers to maybe, give them a break. I think they're doing a heck of a job as it is. Actually, matter of fact, 90% I think was the
97.
latest. 97%
Actually, in
latest
favor.
poll. So Ron, I mean, is that legitimate then in your eyes? Talking in a vehicle with a passenger is a lot different to you than speaking on a cell phone while you're driving?
It is. When you're sitting with a passenger, talking with a passenger, and you're going to be merging, for example, that passenger can see what's happening more than somebody on the phone who can't see what's happening at all. And if you quit talking to them, they can see that you're dealing with traffic. Whereas when you're on the phone, it's more of a distraction.
So how do we pinpoint, how do we determine what is considered a distraction? I understand, cell phones, clearly. Texting, yeah, I get it. It's, pretty obvious distraction.
Well,
but the list could go on and on.
Well,
Derek kind of makes a good point there.
The one gentleman that was talking,
Derek,
a few minutes ago there, what we have to realize when we're driving, we want to ignore the unimportant. So yeah, there's a lot of other things out there that are off to the sides of the road, but we don't want to be looking at that. We want to look at what's on the road and what's a hazard to us, a potential hazard. So ignore the unimportant.
Ignore the pretty girl across the street.
And
Pull over and look at the girl if you want, but
maybe have a conversation.
And if I could add to that, Kevin, as well, there are a multitude of items that are covered in distracted driving. But we have to look at the spirit of the legislation as well. If somebody's driving down the road and reaches down and takes a sip of their coffee, is that impacting their driving? Probably not. So I'd be hard pressed to find a police officer that's going to pull you over unless you're guzzling it and weaving into the next lane. Obviously, there's an impact on driving behavior. But if you're turning up the volume of your radio, having a sip of coffee, that's different than somebody that's got a burger in one hand, fries in the other, and is steering with their knees.
Yeah.
There's different degrees, and common sense has to play a part in this as well.
For sure. That's just ignorant, isn't it? So how does it work from an officer's perspective then? I mean, are officers looking for traffic violations and then, I guess after the fact, noticing that, that's a distracted driver? I can see that they're on their phone, or is it,
absolutely,
I see them on the phone, now it's the ticket type thing? I mean, does it usually, I guess what I'm asking is, are officers looking for distracted drivers, or is it a result of another traffic violation most of the time?
Well, I can't speak to what an individual officer does out there. Myself, if you're driving around and somebody's doing 60 kilometers an hour on Deerfoot Trail, I think, what is going on? And you pull around to pass, and sure enough, they're chatting on their phone. They're obviously impacting public safety. I'm going to pull them over and either talk to them or give them a ticket. Officers driving around and they see this kind of behavior, weaving, unsignaled lane changes, following too close, dangerous, risky events to the general public and to that driver themselves. Yeah, they're going to be stopped.
There were 665 collisions that can be attributed to distracted driving. Are these usually rear-end collisions?